Morning sunlight streamed through the beige velvet curtains, spilling across the luxurious penthouse at the heart of Washington, D.C. On the 40th floor of the Capitol View Tower, Sophia Harris, the only daughter of Senator William Harris, sat reading the newspaper with an expression of practiced indifference. A cup of cappuccino had long gone cold on the table, and her iPhone buzzed endlessly, with notifications, work emails, partner messages, and party invitations from the elite social circles of D.C. Sophia sat cross-legged, her golden hair loosely tied back, wrapped in a silk white robe. Born into wealth, Harvard-educated, and now running her mother's brand, Harris Cosmetics, she was known in the media as the Ice Princess of D.C. for her glacial stare and a smile that never lingered for more than 2 seconds. The automatic door slid open. A middle-aged man with silvering hair and a steady gait entered, dressed in a sharp gray suit. Senator William Harris, her father famed for his eloquence and uncompromising discipline, never needed to announce his arrival at his daughter's home. "Here to check on me again?" Father Sophia asked lazily, her voice carrying its usual air of arrogance. "Not to check," he replied, setting a folder on the table, his tone turning grave. "Last night someone broke into my private residence. They didn't take anything, but they left a used bullet, right in the middle of the dining table." Sophia froze the newspaper, trembling slightly in her hands. "Who would do that? The FBI is investigating, but I believe I'm not the only target." He met her eyes. "Sophia, you're the easiest one to get to. Starting today, you'll have a personal bodyguard." Sophia let out a short laugh, half mocking, half bitter. "You make it sound like I'm a 10-year-old who needs someone to hold my hand crossing the street. I can protect myself, Father. This isn't up for debate." His voice was steel. "I've already chosen someone. His name is Peter Williams. Former Marine, saved my life in Baghdad. From now on, he stays with you whether you like it or not." Sophia stood, tossing the newspaper aside. "You can't force me to live like a prisoner. I have meetings, events, a public image to maintain. No one wants to see Sophia Harris walking beside some stiff ex-soldier." "I don't care about your image," he said coldly, turning away. "I care about your safety." The door shut, leaving Sophia standing in the silent room. In her eyes flickered anger, but beneath it, a trace of fear she refused to acknowledge. That afternoon, Harris Cosmetics buzzed with gossip. Employees whispered as a tall man in a black shirt, tactical pants, and combat boots walked through the lobby. He wore no sunglasses yet. His sharp, composed gaze silenced the room. "Excuse me, you are—" the receptionist stammered. "Peter Williams. I have an appointment with CEO Sophia Harris." From the intercom came Sophia's voice. "Send him in." Peter entered the sleek office. Sunlight from the glass wall illuminated Sophia's white suit, making her look sculpted and untouchable. She looked up, scanning him from head to toe. "You're the man my father hired. Ms. Harris, you know I don't need a bodyguard, right?" Peter said nothing. He stood straight, hands clasped behind his back, eyes alert, like he was guarding a head of state, not a temperamental heiress. Sophia smirked, voice dripping with disdain. "Let me make one thing clear. You do not interfere with my work. Do not enter my office unless I call you, and do not look at me as if I'm your mission." "Understood," Peter replied calmly. "Understood, Ms. Harris. But I take orders only from the senator." Her smile faded. "I don't like people who know more than I do." "Then you'll dislike me for a long time," he said evenly. She didn't know whether to be angry or amused. No one had ever dared speak to her that way. That night, Sophia left the office late. The city glittered, skyscrapers reflecting in her car windows like shards of glass. In the underground parking lot, Peter was already standing beside her Bentley. "Are you following me?" "Just doing my job, Ms. Harris. I don't need you. Leave. The senator ordered me not to let you out of my sight. Sophia narrowed her eyes. And if I refuse to go, I'll stand here until you do. And if I drive over you. He met her gaze steadily. Then at least you'll still be safe. I'll handle the rest. Sophia bit her lip, gripping the wheel tighter. For reasons she couldn't explain, she couldn't press the gas. This man wasn't afraid of her, of power, or even of death. She sighed, opening the door. Get in. But if you annoy me, you're fired in 2 minutes. Peter got into the back seat, silent. As they drove through Georgetown's cobblestone streets, Sophia glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He was watching the road, not her. The city lights cast soft shadows over his face, strong calm and strangely warm. How old are you? She asked. 28. Married number. Just someone I'd die to protect. Who, my sister? Sophia was quiet, surprised. His tone had changed, gentle, sincere. But she quickly hid her reaction, putting her mask back on. Fine, Peter. Just remember, I'm not your mission. I'm your boss. Yes, Ms. Harris, he replied, voice steady. Yet at the corner of his mouth, a faint smile flickered, one she didn't notice. The next noon, Sophia attended the launch of her new product line at the Hay Adams Hotel, an event packed with media and celebrities. She walked the red carpet flawlessly, cameras flashing non-stop. Peter followed close behind, scanning every corner. Everything went smoothly until a man in the crowd moved too close to the stagehand, slipping into his coat. In a split second, Peter lunged forward, pulling Sophia down and shielding her. Shouts erupted, police rushed in, and the man was restrained. His pocket held only a phone. The hall descended into chaos, cameras flashing wildly. Sophia's heart pounded as Peter helped her up, his hand bleeding from a small cut. You're hurt, she gasped. It's nothing. You're safe, that's what matters. That simple sentence made her heart tremble for a second, but as reporters swarmed around them, she quickly straightened her icy mask, returning. Don't get the wrong idea, she said coldly. You were just doing your job. Peter nodded silently, but as she turned away, he kept watching her eyes, filled with something even he couldn't define. That night, back at her penthouse, Sophia stared into the mirror. She could still see him diving to protect her, the steel blue eyes fearless and unwavering. Why would someone like him choose to guard her? She told herself not to care, but her heart refused to listen. Down in the parking lot, Peter sat quietly in his car, gazing up at the lights still glowing from the 40th floor. He didn't know why he was still there, his shift long over. Maybe because for the first time in years, his heart wasn't still anymore. Washington was peaceful that night, but across the street, a black SUV idled in the shadows. Inside, a young man stared up at the Capitol View Tower, jealousy burning in his eyes. So you think you can escape me that easily, Sophia Harris? His voice rasped, twisted with rage. On the seat beside him lay a single bullet engraved with the initials W. Harris, a silent promise of the storm about to break. The morning sun spilled across the marble floors of the Harris penthouse, painting soft gold over everything it touched. Yet inside the air was cold, like the quiet before a storm. Sophia Harris stood before her mirrored wall, straightening her pearl earrings, as if preparing for battle. Every move she made was precise, deliberate, the kind of perfection that came from a life spent under scrutiny. From the corner of the room, Peter Williams waited, standing at ease but alert. Dressed in his usual black shirt and charcoal slacks, he blended into the room like a shadow that refused to leave. You don't have to stand there like a statue, Sophia muttered without turning. I'm not standing, Peter said mildly. I'm observing. Observing what? She met his eyes in the mirror. The way I brush my hair, You're not here to write a report. No, he said, his tone even. Just making sure no one else is watching. Sophia turned, caught off guard. His gaze was steady, unreadable, but there was a glint of something else. Calm determination, and beneath that, something dangerously close to warmth. She looked away first. Let's go, she said, grabbing her purse. I have a meeting downtown. They stepped into the private elevator. The descent was silent, except for the faint hum of the city below. When the doors opened, Washington, D.C. came alive in front of them. Streets already filled with traffic sunlight glinting off the domes and glass towers. Sophia's car, a sleek black Bentley, waited at the curb. Peter opened the door. I can do it myself, she said automatically. I know. He gestured toward the open door anyway. But it's my job. She hesitated, then slipped inside. As Peter rounded to the driver's seat, she sighed quietly, watching the world blur past the window once the car began to move. It wasn't supposed to feel like this, having him around. It wasn't supposed to feel safe. They reached Harris Cosmetics headquarters in less than 20 minutes. The glass tower glittered above the heart of downtown D.C., a monument to the Harris family's empire. Employees nodded respectfully as Sophia entered the lobby, followed by Peter, whose presence drew curious glances. Inside the elevator, Sophia crossed her arms. Don't hover over me in front of my staff. They'll think I've lost my independence. I doubt anyone thinks you've lost anything, Peter replied, pressing the button for the top floor. You look like someone who never loses. She turned toward him, lips parting as if to retort, but stopped. The elevator chimed, doors sliding open to reveal the executive floor. Waiting there, leaning casually against the glass wall, was Jeffrey Lang, CEO of Lang Enterprises, and the man her mother used to call a good match. Miss Harris, he greeted, his smile too smooth to be sincere. I thought I'd surprise you. Sophia forced a smile. Jeffrey, you should have called. I don't like surprises. I know, he said softly. That's why I brought coffee instead. He handed her a cup, but before she could take it, Peter stepped forward, intercepting the motion. I'll take that, sir. Jeffrey's eyes flickered, the smile faltering for half a second. And you are her security detail. Ah, Jeffrey chuckled. A watchdog. How charming. Sophia stiffened. That's enough, Jeff. She turned toward Peter. You can wait outside. Peter hesitated, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. The door closed behind him, but the tension remained. Jeffrey's voice dropped as he leaned closer. You don't really need a bodyguard, do you? The great Sophia Harris, protected by some ex-soldier, doesn't suit you. Sophia kept her face neutral. It's temporary. My father insists. Your father always insists. He took a step closer, his voice almost tender. You don't have to live under his shadow forever. You could make your own choices, you know. Sophia met his gaze, sharp and unyielding. And what would you know about my choices? Jeffrey smiled faintly. Enough to know I'd like to be one of them. Before she could answer, the door burst open. Peter stepped in, his hand subtly resting near the holster beneath his jacket. Ma'am, he said calmly, your next meeting starts in 10 minutes. Sophia blinked, realizing he had no idea what meeting he was referring to. He'd just saved her from a situation she didn't want to explain. Thank you, she said quietly. That'll be all, Mr. Lang. Jeffrey's jaw tightened. You're letting him interrupt us now. Good day, Jeff. He left, slamming the door. When the sound faded, Sophia exhaled. You didn't have to do that. Yes, Peter said simply. I did. For a second, the air between them felt charged, fragile, intimate. Then Sophia brushed past him. You're insufferable. Peter followed, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. That makes two of us. That evening, Sophia decided she needed space. Against Peter's warning, She drove herself to Georgetown waterfront, wanting to clear her mind. The Potomac River shimmered under the fading light. Laughter and jazz spilled from nearby restaurants. She parked by the pier and sat for a long time watching the water. Peter had been right again. About everything. About the security threats. About Jeff. About the fact that she wasn't as untouchable as she pretended to be. She hated that he was right. A shadow fell across her window. "You shouldn't be here alone," Peter's voice said from outside. Sophia startled, turning to see him leaning against her car door. "You followed me. Tracked your GPS. You invaded my privacy. I protected your life." The sharpness in his tone made her chest tighten. There was no arrogance there, only quiet conviction. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the uniform or the duty, but the exhaustion beneath his composure. The faint scar along his jaw, the way his eyes softened whenever she met them, even for a second. "Do you ever stop being like this?" she murmured. "Like what, unshakable?" He smiled slightly. "Only when I sleep." Sophia turned away, hiding the flicker of emotion in her eyes. "I'm going home. I'll drive." "No, thank you. Then I'll follow." She huffed in frustration, slamming her door shut. The car sped off, tires squealing against the pavement. But through the rearview mirror, she could still see him, his black motorcycle gliding a few cars behind headlights, steady like a promise she couldn't escape. Hours later, Sophia stood on her balcony, city lights stretching endlessly before her. She tried to focus on the skyline, but her thoughts kept circling back to the way Peter had looked at her earlier, not as a superior, not as a client, but as a person. No one had ever looked at her that way. She wrapped her arms around herself as a cool breeze swept through. Down on the street, she thought she saw the shadow of someone lingering near her building. She squinted, frowning. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Miss Harris." A voice drawled on the other end, low, amused, too familiar. "You really should listen to your father more." "Who is this?" "Let's just say someone who doesn't like being ignored." A shiver ran down her spine. "Jeffrey." The voice chuckled. "Smart girl. Tell your bodyguard I said hi." The line went dead. Sophia's heart pounded. She stared down at the street again, but whoever had been there was gone. Within seconds, Peter was at her door, breath slightly heavy, as if he'd run up 40 floors. "What happened?" She blinked. "How did you—" "I monitor your security feed. I saw someone outside." "What did they say?" Sophia hesitated, torn between pride and fear. "Nothing. Just a prank call." Peter's jaw tightened. It didn't sound like a prank. He stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. "You're not safe here alone. From now on, I'll be stationed outside your door. You can't. I can. And I will." She stared at him, ready to argue, but something in his eyes stopped her. The kind of unspoken promise that felt both terrifying and comforting. "Fine," she whispered, "but stay out of my personal life." "Your personal life just became my mission," he said softly. Sophia looked away, pretending she didn't hear the faint tremor in her own heartbeat. Outside, the city hummed quietly, unaware that somewhere within its glittering towers, two worlds so different, so stubborn, had just begun to orbit dangerously close. And somewhere in the darkness, a man with a grudge watched their windows through a sniper's scope, a faint smirk curling his lips. "Let's see how long your hero lasts, Miss Harris." The crosshairs steadied, the safety clicked off, and the night held its breath. The following morning broke under a soft gray sky, the kind that blurred the line between dawn and mist. The city outside was still stirring awake, yet inside the Harris penthouse, Tension already simmered like an unspoken storm. Sophia Harris stood by the kitchen window, nursing a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass-composed, flawless, untouchable. But her fingers trembled slightly, betraying the unease beneath that perfect surface. Behind her, Peter Williams leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his voice low but firm. "You should have told me about that call last night." Sophia didn't turn. "I told you it was nothing." "Nothing." Peter's tone hardened. "You think threats are nothing? The man outside your building wasn't a hallucination, Sophia." Her jaw tightened. "I don't need you to lecture me." "I'm not lecturing you," he said, stepping closer. "I'm trying to keep you alive." Something about the calm in his voice, the quiet authority, made her pulse quicken. She hated that his presence made her feel both safe and exposed. She finally faced him. "I didn't hire you, Peter. My father did. So don't talk to me like I owe you something." Peter met her gaze steadily. "You don't owe me anything, ma'am. But your safety isn't optional." They stood inches apart, the silence between them charged and fragile. Then Sophia exhaled sharply, breaking eye contact. "Fine. You win. What now?" "Captain." He blinked at the nickname but ignored it. "We strengthen your schedule. No solo trips, no sudden detours. You'll have full surveillance whenever you leave the building." She smirked. "Sounds romantic. Only if you like being followed 24 hours a day." Sophia set her cup down, lips curving faintly despite herself. "You're impossible." Peter didn't reply. He didn't have to. His quiet conviction filled every inch of space between them, steady as the heartbeat she tried so hard to ignore. By noon, the day had shifted gears. Sophia arrived at the Harris Cosmetics headquarters for a shareholders meeting with Peter, walking a step behind, her silent, watchful, unreadable. The room was filled with the usual power players, lawyers, executives, media consultants. Yet the moment Sophia entered, all eyes followed her, admiration wrapped in calculation. She took her seat at the head of the long mahogany table. "Let's begin." The presentation started, numbers and projections flickering across the digital screen. Peter positioned himself near the entrance, scanning faces, movements, every subtle shift. He'd been in enough war zones to recognize unease when he saw it, and something about today didn't sit right. A whisper at the end of the table caught his attention. A man in a gray suit, mid-40s, unfamiliar. His hand slipped under the table for a moment too long to be casual. Peter's instincts kicked in. He moved before he thought, crossing the room in 2 long strides. "Ma'am." A sharp crack split the air. The glass wall behind Sophia shattered, sending shards flying. Screams erupted. Peter lunged, grabbing her by the waist, pulling her to the ground, just as another bullet tore through the conference room. They hit the carpet hard, his body covering hers. For a second, everything slowed, the sound of shattering glass, her rapid breathing against his chest, his heartbeat pounding against her ear. "Stay down," he murmured. Security alarms blared. Peter rolled off her just enough to draw his weapon, eyes sweeping the window. Across the street, a faint glint caught the light sniper scope. He fired once. The glint disappeared. Chaos filled the room, executives crawling for cover, guards shouting into radios. Peter stayed crouched beside Sophia, scanning the skyline. His forearm brushed against her shoulder, warm and firm. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, voice trembling. "No." "You? Not yet." Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the noise around them vanished. All that existed was the electric thrum between them, the raw pulse of fear, adrenaline, and something dangerously close to longing. Hours later, the chaos subsided. Police cars surrounded the building, red and blue lights flashing like restless ghosts. Reporters swarmed the entrance, shouting questions about the attempted assassination. Inside the penthouse, Sophia sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket she didn't really need. Peter stood nearby, still in the same torn shirt from earlier. His forearm grazed a streak of blood tracing the edge of his wrist. "You should let a doctor look at that," she said quietly. He glanced at his arm, then at her. "I've had worse." "That's not the point." Peter smiled faintly. "You care?" Sophia glared, but her cheeks colored. "Don't flatter yourself. I just don't want my father thinking I get my bodyguard injured every week." "Understood." He looked down, almost smiling again. "For the record, you're not easy to guard. I'm not easy, period." "I noticed." Silence stretched between them again, thick, fragile, heavy with what neither dared to say. Finally, Sophia spoke, her voice softer. "Thank you for saving me." Peter met her gaze, and something flickered there, an emotion he tried to hide, but couldn't. "It's my job." Still, she whispered, "Thank you." Her hand brushed his for half a second, barely a touch, but it was enough to send something sharp through both of them. He pulled away first. "You should rest," he said, stepping back. "I'll be right outside." She nodded, though her heart refused to settle. When he closed the door behind him, Sophia let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her fingers still tingled where they'd brushed his skin. She told herself it was adrenaline, fear, gratitude, anything but what it truly was. Outside her room, Peter sat in the hallway, back against the wall, gun within reach. The city glowed far below its pulse, steady and endless. He'd faced enemies before, men with rifles, bombs, knives, but none of them unnerved him the way Sophia Harris did. Every time she looked at him, he felt a shift, a crack in the walls he'd built since the war. He thought about her stubbornness, her pride, the flash of vulnerability in her eyes when she thought no one noticed. Somewhere along the line, his mission had stopped being about duty. He hated that realization almost as much as he needed it. The elevator dinged softly. A man in a dark suit stepped out, Agent Monroe from the FBI assigned to the Harris security detail. Williams Monroe greeted. "We've got a lead. The sniper's weapon was registered to a private firm in New York. Guess who's on the board?" Peter's expression darkened. "Jeffrey Lang." "Bingo." Peter clenched his jaw. "I knew it." Monroe's eyes narrowed. "Be careful. If Lang's behind this, it's bigger than we thought. Corporate sabotage, political leverage, maybe more." Peter nodded slowly. He won't get another chance. When Monroe left, Peter turned toward Sophia's door. Through the small gap at the bottom, he saw the faint shadow of her pacing. He wanted to tell her everything, to warn her, but one look at her fragile peace that afternoon stopped him. For tonight, she needed rest. He'd handle the darkness himself. Sophia couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept looping back to the moment Peter pulled her down, the heat of his body shielding hers, the quiet steadiness in his voice, even when death brushed their shoulders. He was more than a soldier. He was something she didn't understand yet. Something that scared her more than bullets ever could. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You survived today. Let's see about tomorrow." Her blood ran cold. She stared at the message, then at the window. Somewhere out there, someone was watching, and Peter. She thought of him out in the hall, sitting alone, eyes scanning every shadow. He'd become her wall, her anchor, her unwanted protector. But what happens when the wall begins to feel like home? At 300 a.m., unable to bear the silence, Sophia cracked the door open. Peter looked up instantly, the movement fluid, instinctive. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Neither could you." He smiled faintly. Comes with the job. Peter. She hesitated, stepping closer. Do you ever get tired of it? The constant guarding, fighting, never having a life of your own. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. Sometimes. But then I remember why I do it. For the paycheck. For the people who still need me. Sophia swallowed hard, her throat tight. Like your sister. His eyes softened. Yes. Like her. A pause. Then softly she said, You're not what I expected, Peter. Neither are you. And before she could think of a reply, the building's lights flickered. The sudden blackout drowned the penthouse in darkness. Peter moved instantly, pushing Sophia back inside her room, gun drawn. Stay behind me. From the hallway came the faint click of a door, then footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Sophia's breath caught. Peter signaled her to stay quiet. His silhouette merged with the dark, his senses sharpened like steel. The footsteps stopped right outside the suite. Then, silence. A second later, a laser dot appeared on the wall, red steady, aimed directly at Sophia's head. Peter tackled her to the floor just as the gunshot shattered the air. Glass exploded. The bullet embedded in the wall inches from where she'd been standing. Alarms screamed. Peter fired back through the darkness, the muzzle flash lighting his face, in stark relief, focused, fearless, lethal. The intruder fled. Peter chased, but by the time he reached the stairwell, only echoes remained. When he returned, Sophia was trembling, crouched by the couch, tears glinting in her eyes. He knelt beside her, his voice softer now. It's over. You're safe. Her fingers clutched his sleeve. No, Peter, it's not over. Whoever they are, they want me dead. He met her gaze, his own steady, resolute. Then they'll have to go through me first. In that moment, Sophia realized something terrifying and beautiful all at once. He wasn't just her protector anymore. He was the line between her life and oblivion, and she wasn't sure which side of that line her heart was standing on. The morning after the attack felt strangely quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Sunlight cut through the curtains of the Harris penthouse, painting long golden lines across the floor, where glass shards had been swept into a pile. The faint scent of smoke still lingered in the air. Sophia sat on the edge of the couch, a cup of untouched tea cooling in her hands. Her hair was uncombed, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but her posture remained defiant, chin lifted, gaze distant, refusing to crumble. Across from her, Peter was on the phone with the FBI, his voice calm and clipped. Yes, I'm certain the shooter used infrared optics. Entry was from the West Side Terrace, 8th floor, rooftop, across the street. Yes. Understood. When he hung up, Sophia finally spoke. What did they say? They'll run surveillance. But the building across the street belongs to a holding company tied to Lang Enterprises. Sophia's heart sank. Jeffrey Peters' expression didn't change, but his silence was answer enough. She set the cup down, hands trembling slightly. So, this is what happens when you reject a man in power. Peter looked at her, his gaze softer now. This isn't your fault. I don't need sympathy. I'm not offering it, he said evenly. I'm offering protection. Her lips parted, a sharp retort ready, but she stopped. The way he said protection wasn't professional anymore. It was personal. It was him. Peter, she said quietly, why do you care this much? He hesitated, as though the question reached deeper than she meant it to. Because people like Lang think they can do whatever they want and get away with it. I've seen too many men like him. Sophia studied him carefully, noticing the faint scar running down his forearm, the hardness in his eyes that only came from surviving things most people couldn't imagine. "Who did this to you?" she asked softly. He blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" "That look," she said. "The one you get when you think no one's watching, like you've already lost something before the fight even starts." Peter's jaw flexed. He turned away, staring out the glass balcony. "It's not important." "It is," she pressed. "You don't just wake up one day and decide to be bulletproof." "What happened?" He took a long breath, as if weighing whether to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, rough around the edges. "I was deployed to Fallujah when I was 21. My unit walked into an ambush. We lost 9 men that day. I was supposed to cover the rear, but the comms failed. By the time backup came, they were gone." He swallowed hard. "My commanding officer's son was among them." Sophia's throat tightened. "You blamed yourself." "I still do." The silence that followed was heavy, not awkward, but intimate. She wanted to reach out to touch the hand resting on his knee, but she didn't. She wasn't sure if he would let her. "I left the Marines 2 years later," he continued. "Got into private security work. It paid well enough to cover my sister's medical bills." "Lily." Sophia whispered, remembering the small photograph she had once glimpsed in his wallet. A girl, no older than 7, smiling despite the oxygen tube across her face. Peter nodded. "She's the only family I have left." "And you still took this job," Sophia said softly, "even after everything you've been through." "I didn't take it for the money," he said, glancing at her. "Your father saved Lily's treatment once. I owed him a debt." Sophia felt her chest tighten. She wanted to say something, anything, but words seemed too fragile for the weight in the room. Finally, she stood, crossing to the balcony where the morning light framed her in gold. "Do you ever get tired of saving people who don't want to be saved?" Peter looked at her. "Only when they pretend they don't need saving." Their eyes met, and something inside her cracked quietly, completely. For the first time in her life, Sophia didn't have a clever answer. That afternoon, they were escorted to the FBI headquarters downtown for a debrief. Reporters had swarmed the streets, cameras flashing, hungry for a story. Peter kept close, his hand hovering near Sophia's back, not touching, but there like a shield. Inside, Agent Monroe greeted them grimly. "We traced the shooter's rifle to a private auction in Nevada. Bought under a shell company. Guess whose name came up again?" Sophia didn't have to ask. "Jeffrey Lang." Monroe nodded. "He's out of the country now. Zurich. But his company's assets here are under investigation." Peter leaned forward. "That won't stop him. He's too connected." "Then we find another way," Sophia said sharply. Both men turned to her, surprised by the steel in her voice. "I'm tired of being hunted," she continued. "I built this company. I worked for every inch of respect people now try to take from me. If Lang wants to destroy me, he'll have to look me in the eye while he tries." Peter's gaze lingered on her, part pride, part fear. He'd seen courage before, but this was different. Hers was the kind that burned quietly, stubbornly, refusing to die. When the meeting ended, they stepped into the rain. The city was slick with water, and police sirens echoed somewhere in the distance. Sophia tilted her face up, eyes half closed, as raindrops ran down her cheeks. Peter opened an umbrella over her, but she shook her head. "Let me feel it. You'll catch cold." "I'd rather feel something real," she murmured. He hesitated, then folded the umbrella. The rain soaked through his shirt, darkening the fabric. For a moment, they just stood there, the world rushing around them. Two people from different wars finding quiet in the same storm. That night, Peter drove Sophia back to the penthouse. The air between them was heavier now, dense with unspoken words. When they reached the lobby, she turned to him. "Do you ever stop? Stop what, carrying everything like it's your fault?" He exhaled through his nose, a faint smirk on his lips. Do you ever stop pretending you're fine? Sophia stared at him speechless. The elevator doors opened, but neither moved. The faint hum of the city filled the silence. Then, without thinking, she reached out, fingertips brushing the scar on his wrist. He froze. "Who bandaged this?" she whispered. "I did." "Poorly," she murmured. Then she took his hand, gently turned it upward, and pressed her silk scarf against the wound, tying it tight. "You protect everyone else. Let someone protect you for once." His voice dropped almost a whisper. "That's not how this works. Maybe it should be." Their eyes locked. For a moment, the elevator walls disappeared, and all that existed was breath closeness and the fragile ache of two people who had spent their lives hiding behind armor. When the elevator stopped, Sophia stepped back, the spell breaking. "Good night, Peter." He swallowed hard. "Good night, Sophia." But when she disappeared behind her door, he remained standing there, watching the faint sliver of light beneath it, wondering how long a man could stand between duty and desire before the line finally blurred. Sometime after midnight, Peter's phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. "We have Lily." His blood ran cold. Another message followed an image. His sister tied to a chair, a bruise darkening her cheek. The text beneath it read, "Come alone. You know where. One word to the FBI, and she dies." Peter's pulse roared in his ears. He rose from the chair, heart hammering. For the first time, he felt the kind of fear that stripped a man to his core, not for himself, but for the one person he couldn't lose. He grabbed his gun, his keys, and moved for the door. But when the elevator doors opened, Sophia was already standing there barefoot, her silk robe flowing loosely, eyes wide with alarm. "What's wrong?" He froze, his expression betraying everything. "Peter." She whispered, "What happened?" He shook his head. "Stay here. Tell me." "They have my sister." His voice cracked low and raw. "Lang's people." Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. I'll handle it," he said, stepping past her. "You need to stay safe. Don't you dare leave me out of this," she snapped. "You're not walking into that alone." Peter turned sharply, eyes blazing. "If I don't, she dies." Sophia didn't flinch. "Then let me help you." He stared at her, this woman who had once been untouchable, who now stood trembling but unyielding in front of him. And in that moment, he realized something painful and true. She had already crossed the line too. "It's not your fight," he said quietly. Her voice broke. "It became my fight the moment they came for you." Peter's breath caught. For a fleeting second, everything around them, the danger, the fear, the walls faded into silence. He reached out, brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, his hand trembling against her cheek. "Sophia, promise me you'll come back," she whispered. He hesitated, eyes searching hers, and then softly he lied. "I promise." And before she could stop him, Peter stepped into the elevator, the doors closing between them like a quiet heartbreak. As the numbers descended, he pressed a blood-stained photo of Lily to his chest and whispered a prayer only soldiers knew, for redemption, for mercy, and for the woman he should never have fallen in love with. The highway stretched endlessly under the bruised sky, neon lights bleeding across the wet asphalt as Peter's car cut through the night. The city fell behind him, its hum fading into nothing but the pounding of his own pulse. Every few seconds he looked down at the phone on the passenger seat, at the image of Lily bound, terrified, still breathing. That was all that mattered. The address in the message led him toward the industrial outskirts of Newark, to a long-abandoned shipping yard that stank of rust and ocean air. Containers towered like silent tombs, rain dripping down their sides. The place was quiet. Too quiet. He killed the headlights and parked a block away, stepping out into the cold drizzle. Every sense, sharpened muscle memory from the battlefield returning in an instant. He loaded his gun, checked the chamber, then moved through the shadows one heartbeat at a time. When he reached the main warehouse, he could already hear the low hum of generators. Light spilled from the cracks between the doors. Peter pressed himself against the metal wall, listening, then froze. Footsteps. Too many. He pulled the side door open just enough to see inside. A dozen armed men surrounded a steel chair in the center of the room. Lily sat there, duct tape across her mouth, wrists bound. And behind her, calm as a god on his throne, was Jeffrey Lang. Peter's jaw clenched. "I know you're out there, Williams." Lang's voice echoed smooth and venomous. "Come in. Let's end this farce." Peter stepped into the light weapon raised. "Let her go, Lang." Lang smirked. "You came alone. Predictable. You always were a good soldier, too loyal for your own good." He gestured to his men. "Guns down. Let's make this civil." Peter didn't move. "She's not part of this." "Oh, but she is," Lang said, walking toward him. His tailored suit looked absurd in the grime and flickering light. "See, you're not the only one who protects the people you love. Sophia was mine, until you got in the way." Peter's grip tightened on his gun. "She was never yours." Lang chuckled low and dark. "You think you've changed her? That spoiled little heiress suddenly grew a conscience because of you. She'll forget you the moment she realizes what you've done." Peter's voice dropped. "What I've done?" Lang took a step closer. "You left your post once, didn't you? Back in Fallujah. You told yourself it was bad intel, but the truth is, you hesitated. You froze. Men died because of you. The government buried it. But I know everything about you, Williams. Every sin, every scar." The words hit like a blow. Peter didn't answer. He couldn't. Lang smiled wider. "You want to save your sister? Then here's your chance. Put the gun down." Peter hesitated, his gaze flicking to Lily. Her eyes were wide, pleading. She shook her head, desperately muffled cries beneath the tape. "Now," Lang said softly. Peter lowered the weapon, slow and deliberate, and slid it across the floor. "Good," Lang murmured. "Now we can talk like gentlemen." But the moment Lang turned his back, Peter moved, years of training condensed into a breath. He grabbed the nearest guard's rifle, slammed the butt into his jaw, and pivoted, firing in a clean arc. 2 men fell before they even realized what had happened. Chaos erupted. Bullets ripped through the air, sparking against steel. Lily screamed behind the tape. Peter rolled behind a stack of crates, fired again, 1 shot, 1 kill, precise and brutal. Lang ducked behind a pillar, snarling. "Kill him! Kill the bastard!" The warehouse exploded into sound metal, shrieking glass shattering, boots pounding. Peter moved like a ghost, each motion honed by instinct and desperation. He was bleeding now, a graze along his arm, but he didn't stop. When the last man dropped, the silence that followed was deafening. Smoke curled through the air. Peter staggered forward, chest heaving, and ripped the tape from Lily's mouth. She gasped, sobbing as he untied her wrists. "It's okay," he murmured, pulling her close. "I've got you. You're safe now." "Peter, behind you," she screamed. Lang was on him in an instant, slamming the butt of a pistol into Peter's ribs. The impact drove him to his knees. Lang fired, but Peter twisted the bullet, grazing his shoulder instead of his skull. Pain flared, white-hot. They grappled, fists colliding, metal clanging. Lang was strong, but Peter fought like a man with nothing left to lose. He slammed Lang against the wall, rage blazing behind his eyes. "You don't get to touch her again," Peter growled. Lang laughed through bloodied teeth. "You think she'll ever forgive you for this?" For what's about to happen, before Peter could react, Lang drew a small detonator from his coat pocket. "There's enough C4 under this floor to erase this entire building. Insurance policy in case things got messy." Peter's eyes widened. "You're insane." Lang grinned, thumb hovering over the button. "No, Peter. I'm a man in love." The explosion tore through the air before Peter could stop him. A blinding flash. The ground buckled. Metal screamed as fire ripped upward, devouring everything. When Peter woke, the world was ash and silence. His ears rang, his body broke in smoke, filling his lungs. The roof had collapsed, trapping him under twisted beams. He pushed pain slicing through his chest, but it wouldn't budge. "Lily," he rasped. Lily, no answer. Only crackling flames. He dragged himself forward, ignoring the agony in his ribs. A faint cough reached him through the dust. "Peter." He found her wedged under debris, trembling, but alive. Relief surged through him so fiercely he almost wept. "Hang on," he whispered, straining to lift the metal. His muscles screamed, blood soaking through his sleeve, but finally it gave way. He pulled her free, cradling her against him. "You're okay," he murmured. "You're gonna be okay." She looked up at him, tears streaking her soot-stained face. "You're hurt." "Doesn't matter." She shook her head weakly. "We have to go." He turned toward the shattered exit flames licking at the walls. But before he could move, he froze. The detonator still blinked red through the smoke, ticking faster now. They were out of time. Peter grabbed Lily, forcing her toward the gap in the wall. "Run." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." She hesitated, then nodded and stumbled through the wreckage, coughing. Peter turned back, eyes narrowing on Lang's body sprawled near the detonator. Except he wasn't dead. Lang lifted his head, blood pouring down his temple. Still playing the hero, he sneered. "You'll die like one too." Peter lunged, grabbing the device, wrestling it from Lang's grasp. Lang fought back, fingers clawing for the trigger. The beeping grew louder, faster, 5 seconds, maybe less. Peter did the only thing he could. He slammed his elbow into Lang's jaw, drove the detonator into the burning floor, and shoved the man backward. The explosion that followed shattered the sky. When Sophia arrived at the scene with the FBI, the night was red and screaming. Firefighters battled the inferno as police blocked the perimeter. Her clothes were soaked from the rain, her face streaked with tears. She didn't remember crying. "Where is he?" she demanded. "Where's Peter Williams?" An officer shook his head. "Ma'am, it's too dangerous. The building's collapsing." She tried to push past him, but strong arms held her back. "You don't understand," she shouted. "He's in there. He's—" A voice cut through the chaos. Weak, hoarse, familiar. "Sophia." She spun. Peter stood a few yards away, covered in ash and blood, his arm wrapped around Lily. The two of them looked like ghosts, broken, but alive. For a moment, the world stopped. Sophia ran to him, her breath catching as she reached out, afraid to touch him, in case he wasn't real. "You came back," she whispered. He managed a faint, crooked smile. "Told you I would." She hit his chest lightly, then pulled him into a trembling embrace, the smell of smoke and rain mingling in the air. Around them, sirens wailed, and flames died. But for that heartbeat in time, there was only the warmth of his body, and the truth she could no longer deny. Peter held her close, his hand in her hair, the weight of the world finally lifting, only to be replaced by something far more dangerous. Love. And as the paramedics rushed in, as the chaos of rescue swallowed them whole, Sophia knew that what had begun as duty had turned into something irreversible. She had almost lost him once. She wouldn't let it happen again. The following week passed in fragments of silence and recovery. The world moved on, sirens quieted, news reports faded, but for Sophia and Peter, time had slowed to something fragile, like glass on the verge of breaking. Peter was still in the hospital, his shoulder bound in white gauze, a deep bruise darkening his ribs. He refused. The wheelchair insisted on walking, despite the limp. Lily, recovering faster than him, kept by his side with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, quiet, but safe. Sophia came every morning. Sometimes she brought flowers, sometimes coffee, sometimes just the kind of stillness that words couldn't carry. The first time she entered his room after the explosion, he was awake, staring out the window at the winter sky. "You shouldn't be standing," she said softly. He turned, a faint smirk tugging at his mouth. "You shouldn't be worrying. I can't seem to stop," she replied, her voice trembling, despite her attempt to sound composed. "You almost died, Peter." He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Almost doesn't count." She took a breath, stepping closer. The faint scent of antiseptic filled the air, sharp and sterile, but beneath it was the warmth of him, the same quiet strength that had carried her through the worst of nights. "You saved her," Sophia said. "You saved Lily, and you saved me. I don't even know how to begin thanking you." Peter shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." "That's not true," she whispered. He smiled faintly, the kind that hurt more than it comforted. "If I could go back, I'd still do it. Every choice, every bullet. You and Lily are alive. That's enough." Sophia felt tears sting her eyes. She looked away, pretending to fix the vase of tulips she had brought. "Do you always do that? Do what make everything sound like it doesn't matter. Like your life is something you can just throw away for the sake of someone else." He hesitated, then said quietly, "When you've spent your life taking lives, saving one feels like redemption." She turned to him. "You're not a killer, Peter." "I was," he said simply, "once." The silence between them thickened until Lily's voice broke it. "Sophia, can we go to the garden later? I heard they have a koi pond." Sophia smiled at the little girl. "Of course, sweetheart." Then, glancing back at Peter, she added, "If your brother behaves." He gave a small nod, his eyes softening as he looked at the two of them, the woman he'd nearly died for, and the sister he'd nearly lost. For the first time, the thought of living didn't feel like a burden. It felt like hope. 3 days later, Peter was discharged. The first breath of cold air outside the hospital hit him like a shock of clarity. The world was still dangerous, but it was also wide open again. Sophia had insisted on driving him and Lily back to her estate, despite his protests. "You need rest," she'd said firmly, "and Lily deserves better than a motel." He wanted to argue, but couldn't. The truth was, part of him wanted to see what peace looked like in her world. Her home on the Hudson River overlooked the city, a minimalist masterpiece of glass and steel softened by ivy and winter roses. Inside, the walls were warm with light. Lily gasped when she saw the library. "It's bigger than a school," she said, spinning slowly in awe. Sophia laughed softly. "You can borrow anything you like, even the fairy tales." "Really? Really?" Peter watched the exchange quietly. For the first time in years, Lily's eyes shone without fear. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed that look. After dinner, when Lily had fallen asleep in the guest room, Sophia found Peter standing on the balcony, the night wind ruffling his hair. The city glittered in the distance, alive and indifferent. "You don't rest much, do you?" she asked, wrapping her coat tighter. Not used to quiet, he admitted. It makes the noise in my head louder. She stepped beside him. You could try talking instead of fighting it. He looked at her, a small laugh escaping him. Talking to you feels more dangerous than getting shot. Why? Because I don't know how to stop once I start. Sophia met his gaze, the distance between them dissolving like mist. Then, don't stop. He took a breath, the confession forming before he could stop it. When I saw you that night, when I thought I'd never see you again, I realized something. I wasn't fighting to survive. I was fighting to come back to you. Her heart stuttered. The city faded. The stars blurred. Peter. He stepped closer, his voice low, almost reverent. You were the first thing in years that made me believe there's something worth living for. And that terrifies me more than any bullet ever could. Sophia's hands trembled. She reached up, brushing the scar along his jaw. You think you're the only one terrified? He didn't answer. Instead, his hand slid gently around her waist, drawing her closer until she could feel his heartbeat through the layers of fabric, steady, human, alive. When his lips touched hers, it wasn't fire or desperation. It was quiet, slow, deep, the kind of kiss that rewrote every scar and silenced every storm. And for a moment, there was no senator's daughter, no soldier, no ghosts. Only two broken people finding the courage to begin again. But peace was a fragile thing. A week later, while Sophia was in a board meeting at Harris Industries, her assistant burst into the room, pale and trembling. Miss Harris, there's been a breach. Sophia froze. What kind of breach? In our security system. Someone hacked into the company's servers and the assistant hesitated. And they're leaking everything to the press. Financials, trade contracts, your father's offshore accounts. The files are tagged with your name. Sophia's heart stopped. That's impossible. Her phone buzzed violently in her hand. A message appeared on the screen. Tell your bodyguard to stay quiet, or we'll finish what we started. At that exact moment, Peter's number appeared on her screen. She answered, her voice shaking. Peter, where are you, home? He said. His tone clipped. Why? What's wrong? Before she could answer, there was a crash on his end of the line, shattering glass. A shout. Then silence. Peter! She screamed into the phone. Peter. No response. She bolted from the meeting, ignoring the confused faces around her. Outside, rain had begun to fall, drenching the streets in streaks of silver. Her driver barely had time to open the door before she climbed in. Go. Now the car sped through the storm tires, screeching as it turned toward her estate. Her chest felt like it was collapsing inward, every breath sharp and cold. When she arrived, the gates were open. The lights inside flickered. She ran in heels, slipping on the marble floor. Peter, she called. Lily. Her voice echoed. Then she saw him. Peter on the floor of the living room, blood seeping through his shirt, one arm outstretched toward a toppled table. Peter. She dropped to her knees, her hands trembling as she pressed against the wound. Stay with me, please. He coughed, his lips pale, but his eyes still sharp. They took Lily. Her breath hitched. What? She was upstairs. Two men. They said... His voice cracked. They said it's not over. Sophia's world tilted. The walls seemed to spin around her. No, she whispered. Not again. Peter grabbed her wrist weakly, his grip still strong enough to ground her. Listen to me. Don't call the police. They'll kill her if you do. You have to. His sentence broke off in a gasp. Peter stopped talking. You're losing blood. He smiled faintly, even as his eyes fluttered. I've had worse. Don't you dare, she said fiercely, pressing harder on the wound. Don't you dare leave me. his hand-lifted fingers brushing her cheek with a tenderness that made her ache. "I promised I'd come back once. I'll do it again." Tears spilled down her face as the sirens in the distance grew louder. "Peter." He tried to speak, but the strength left his body. His eyes closed. Sophia shook him, her voice breaking. "Peter. Open your eyes, please." The paramedics arrived seconds later, pulling her away, her hands stained crimson. She stood there frozen, watching as they lifted him onto the stretcher, the world dissolving into sirens and rain. As they carried him away, Sophia caught sight of something on the floor, a small piece of paper folded and soaked in blood. She picked it up with trembling fingers. Written across it in Peter's rough handwriting were 3 words: "Find Lang's ghost." Sophia's heart turned to ice. Lang was dead. She had seen his body pulled from the wreckage. But as the ambulance doors slammed shut, she realized the truth. Maybe he hadn't been working alone. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It fell over Manhattan in relentless sheets, washing the city in silver and sorrow. In a dim hospital room overlooking the river, machines hummed softly beside Peter's bed, keeping rhythm with the fragile beat of his heart. Sophia sat at his side, her hand wrapped around his. Her face was pale from sleepless nights, her eyes red from tears she hadn't allowed anyone else to see. The once commanding CEO, the senator's daughter, the woman who could silence a room with a glance, was now just a woman who couldn't breathe without him. Outside, lightning cracked over the skyline, illuminating the hospital window. "Please," she whispered, her forehead pressed against his hand. "You promised you'd come back." No answer, only the steady, sterile rhythm of the monitor. But inside the chaos of her grief, another truth burned quietly. Lily was still missing, and whoever had taken her had left one final breadcrumb. Find Lang's ghost. It haunted Sophia like an unfinished sentence. Lang's body had been recovered from the fire, or what they thought was his body. The DNA match had been partial. Peter had said it didn't feel right, and now she knew why. She straightened, resolve replacing the tremor in her hands. "Hold on, Peter," she murmured. "I'll finish this." The trail led her back to the one place she swore she'd never return to: Lang Enterprises. The glass tower loomed over the East River, dark, except for one lit floor near the top. The company had been seized by the FBI, but that light, it wasn't official. It was bait. Sophia entered through the side entrance, her heels replaced by combat boots, borrowed from Peter's old gear bag. Every echo of her footsteps bounced like a warning. She held her breath and moved through the corridors that once felt like home. The elevator to the 42nd floor was disabled, so she took the stairs. By the time she reached the top, her hands were trembling, not from fear, but fury. When she pushed open the office door, the sight made her blood run cold. Lily sat tied to a chair near the window, duct tape across her mouth, her eyes wide with tears. Behind her, half hidden in shadow, stood a man, tall, unshaven, alive. Jeffrey Lang, or what was left of him. Half his face was scarred, one eye, pale and dead-looking, a souvenir from the fire Peter had left him in. His voice was the same, though smooth and venomous. "I was wondering when you'd come," he drawled. "You always did have terrible timing." Sophia's voice was steady, but her pulse was thunder. "Let her go." Lang smiled, stepping into the light. "Funny. That's exactly what your hero said before he blew up my building. You should have stayed dead." "Death is overrated," he said. "But you, Sophia, you were always alive in all the wrong ways. Cold, arrogant. And then he showed up, the soldier. He broke something in you, didn't he?" She took a step forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "You don't know a damn thing about me." "Oh, I do," Lang said softly. "You fell in love with a man who sees himself as broken. And that's why it worked. Because you're broken too. Sophia's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. You're wrong. He saved me. Lang tilted his head. Then let's see if he can do it again. He raised a remote. The lights flickered, and across the room a massive screen came to life. Surveillance footage filled the display, Peter still unconscious in his hospital bed. Sophia's breath caught. What have you done? Nothing yet, Lang said with a smile. But I could. There's a bomb planted under that floor. One button, and your hero finally gets the ending he deserves. Sophia's world tilted, a cold rush of fear gripping her lungs. You're bluffing. Try me, he said, simply, his thumb resting on the trigger. You can save one Sophia. Him. Or her. Lily whimpered behind the tape, shaking her head. Sophia's mind raced. Her every instinct screamed to run, to throw herself at Lang, to tear the trigger from his hand. But one wrong move, one tremor of that finger. Then a voice came from behind. You talk too much. Lang spun, startled. Peter stood in the doorway, pale but alive, a gun in his hand. His left arm was bandaged, his shirt half-buttoned, his eyes burning with something that was no longer rage, but clarity. Sophia gasped, tears flooding her eyes. Peter. He gave her a small, crooked smile. You didn't really think I'd let you do this alone, did you? Lang laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Of course. The ghost himself. Drop it, Peter said, voice low and lethal. Or what Lang taunted. You'll kill me again. Gladly. Peter replied. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The rain outside drummed against the glass. Then Lang's thumb twitched toward the detonator. The gunshot cracked like lightning. Lang's body jerked, the remote clattering from his hand. He fell backward, the sound of his breath leaving him a harsh rattle. Peter limped forward, smoke curling from his gun. His face was unreadable. Sophia ran to Lily, cutting her free. The girl threw her arms around her brother, sobbing. Peter dropped the gun and held her tightly, burying his face in her hair. It's over, he whispered. It's finally over. But it wasn't, not yet. Lang, somehow still conscious, smiled weakly through bloodied lips. You think you win. You forget. I was never the only one. Sophia froze. What Lang laughed, once low broken, and then the life drained from his eyes. Peter's expression darkened. We need to go. Now. He grabbed Lily's hand, guiding both her and Sophia toward the exit. As they reached the stairwell, the entire building shook, an explosion erupting from below. Lang hadn't lied. There was another bomb. Peter shielded them both as debris rained down. The world turned into chaos, fire smoke, collapsing steel. Sophia coughed, clinging to him. Peter, this way. They stumbled through the stairwell, descending floor by floor, as alarms screamed. A second explosion roared, throwing them against the wall. Peter groaned, pushing himself up, blood running down his temple. Keep moving. The heat grew unbearable, smoke thickening. Lily clung to Sophia's waist, crying. When they finally burst through the ground floor exit, the cold night air hit them like salvation. Firefighters were already outside, sirens blaring. As they collapsed onto the wet pavement, the skyscraper burned behind them, a final pyre for everything that had haunted them. Sophia turned to Peter, touching his face with shaking hands. You're bleeding. He smiled faintly. You should see the other guy. She laughed through tears, her chest aching with relief and love. I can't lose you again. You won't. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You're stuck with me. And then, for the first time, she let herself believe it. Months later, spring returned to New York. The city bloomed again as if the winter had never happened. Sophia stood on the balcony of her rebuilt penthouse, the morning sun painting gold across the skyline. Below, the river sparkled with light. Behind her, laughter echoed Lily's voice. Peter was teaching her how to make pancakes, and judging by the flour in his hair, it wasn't going well. Sophia smiled, closing her eyes for a moment. The ghosts were gone now. Lang, the fire, the fear. What remained was quieter, gentler, the fragile joy of survival. Peter stepped outside, still wearing Lily's apron, his sleeves rolled up. "Breakfast's ruined," he said, grinning. "But she says it's abstract cooking." Sophia laughed, leaning against the doorframe. "I think you two make a good team." He crossed to her, sliding an arm around her waist. "We make a better one." For a long moment they stood there watching the river. The city hummed below, alive and new. Sophia tilted her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever think about what came before?" "Sometimes," he said. "But then you smile and I forget." She turned, looking up at him. "You really mean that?" Peter's eyes softened. Every word. He kissed her slow and certain, the kind of kiss that no longer needed to prove anything. And as the morning light poured over them, Sophia knew that some stories didn't end with revenge or redemption. They ended here, in the quiet after the storm, in the arms of the one who stayed where the shadows finally had no place left to hide.